This is Glenn Healy.
Hi, this is Braden Holtby.
This is Daryl Sutter.
Hi, this is Brian Burke.
This is Jordan Tutu.
This is Keith Morrison.
This is Kelly Rudy.
Hi, this is Scott Hartnell.
Hey, everybody. My name is Steele Fleury.
This is Tim McAuliffe of Sportsnet, and you're listening to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Monday. Hopefully the weekend was good to you. I know a lot of people took the Friday off. We're off to the lake. Graduation over. Kids out of school. It's hot. It's summer. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Now, today's episode is Mr. Twos is back on, and kind of a quick turnaround. He was on episode 178, so if you haven't tuned into that one, I highly suggest you go back. It kind of gives you a little bit of the background on the man who is 222 minutes. Now, before we get into today's episode, let's get to today's episode sponsors, Carly Kloss and the team over at Windsor Plywood. They are the builders of the podcast studio table, and for everything wood, these are the guys. Of course, deck season is in full swing now, and Windsor is stocked up on their Micro Pro Sienna brown treated lumber, so if you got a backyard project on the go, stop in and see the group at Windsor Plywood, or do what I do. Just hop on your phone, check out their social media platforms, and you can see what I'm talking about. We're talking, mantles, decks, windows, doors, or sheds, all the above. Give them a call, 780-875-9663. Jen Gilbert and team for over 45 years, since 1976, the dedicated realtors of Coldwell Banker Cityside Realty have served Lloydminster and the surrounding area. Star Power is what they got going on, providing their clients with 7-day-a-week access. They understand everybody is busy, and now that it's lake season and everything on, I can just imagine being a realtor in town and trying to dodge everybody taking holidays here, there, and everywhere. But service for them is a priority because they know, big life decisions are not made during office hours. That's Coldwell Banker Cityside Realty for everything real estate, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 780-875-3343. And if you got that house, well, mortgage broker Jill Fisher. Now, obviously, her name says it all. She proudly serves the areas of Lloydminster, Bonnyville, Cold Lake, Vermilion, and she's looking forward to working with you for all your mortgage needs. If you're unsure of, what your mortgage is at or what you can get, maybe give her a call, 780-872-2914, or visit her at jfisher.ca, and she'll get it all straightened for you. Clay Smiley and the team over at Prophet River, they're moving. They're going to be in the Old Buckle Tier Lounge, I believe, which is super cool. I can't wait to hear firsthand everything that's going into it, but they specialize in importing firearms from the United States of America. They pride themselves in making the process easy for all their customers, and the team over at Prophet River does all the appropriate paperwork on both sides of the border, which we all know none of us want to do that. To legally get the firearm in Canada into your hands. Just go to ProfitRiver.com and check them out today. They are the major retailer of firearms, optics, and accessories, serving all of Canada. Trophy Gallery, downtown Lloydminster, is Canada's supplier for glass and crystal awards. Now that things are, I was going to say slowly opening up, quickly opening up, maybe this would be a perfect time. We're going to have gatherings getting back together, which means now you can maybe, give out some awards. You're going to have ball season in full-fledged. Well, stop in and see what Clint and the team can do. They can do some pretty slick things in store there. And I always bring up the travel mugs. I mean, the engraving that Clint did for me on the mugs was fantastic. All you got to do is head over to trophygallery.ca. They got all different sizes, shapes, and price ranges. So just contact Clint or Dean today at Trophy Gallery, downtown Lloydminster, Canada's award store. Go to trophygallery.ca to see what I'm talking about. SNP billboard across from the airport now. If you're looking for outdoor signage, stop in and see Raiden Wright and maybe Mrs. Deanna Waller. She can get you squared away, and they can make you look awfully sharp. Give them a call, 306-825-5111. And finally, Gartner Management is a Lloydminster-based company specializing in all types of rental properties to help meet your needs. Whether you're looking for a small office or a 6,000 square foot commercial space, give Wade Gartner a call today, 780-808-5025. And if you're heading into any of these businesses, make sure you let them know you heard about them on the podcast, right? Let's get on to that T-Bar 1 tale of the tape. He likes his identity to remain anonymous. He goes by twos, 222, 222, 222, 111 times 2. You kind of get the point. All right, buckle up, because here we go.
I am Twos from 222 Minutes and My 222 Cents, and you're listening to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast. Today I'm joined by Mr. 222, or as I've dubbed him, Twos. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, and actually it's kind of funny. You're not the only person who's taken to calling me Twos lately. I'm getting that quite a bit on Twitter. It's almost become the unofficial nomenclature, and I'm pretty sure you're the guy who coined it. So you got that going for you.
I'll take that. I laughed when I saw Quick say it. I was like, oh, I just assume that's eventually what it comes down. How do you shorten 222, right? Oh, it's Twos.
Yeah. And then actually he's been by far not the last person to do it either. It's been almost a daily thing. So I don't know. Apparently I'm known as Twos now. It works for me. I know who people are talking about.
How you been on that side? Anyways, you guys are open. You're open for business.
Kinda. I mean, it's nice to just go around. I'm in Calgary and we've got the mask bylaws still in place, but I went and did some running around today without one and nobody gave a rat's ass about it one way or the other. No one looked at me funny or said anything. So it's kind of funny because you've got Nenshi being like, no, you have to do this because I'm in charge. And I don't know, it's kind of a management principle that you don't want to make rules that no one's going to listen to because it undermines your credibility later on. And that's totally what he's done. He's just been like, this is a rule because I'm the guy who makes the rules. And everyone else is like, well, I don't really give a crap. And then now the next time he wants to institute something, he's going to get more pushback on it because everybody ignored the last time he had some sweeping government mandate. It's a pretty stupid move on his part.
I was like sitting here on the border. We're under Saskatchewan still, right? So it's kind of like everybody knows what's happening like 5 minutes to the west, right? And but here we sit, all waiting like good children for July 11th, when Saskatchewan goes full open and we can all dance and parade through the streets and everything else. And I'm like, meanwhile, like literally right there. And I know on the flip side, in the middle of the pandemic, everybody on that side was looking at Lloyd going, 5 minutes over there, we can go to a restaurant, like, or go swimming in the indoor pool, right? Like, it's just a strange time. You were saying before we started that your first podcast experience, like doing this for the first time, was draining. You said your brain was nonstop thinking, and
in a good way.
Yeah, I find myself right now, my brain won't stop thinking. Like there's just so much going on, too. Like so much all the time. And you just like, do I want to look in that? Do I want to listen to that? And then I flick on your podcast and let you blast away at the liberals. And I'm like, well, at least there's that, right? Like give me a couple chuckles and like, but like right now, it's just like, I don't know, man. You just know on Monday, something else is going to come up. And then on Tuesday, another thing is going to, and it's just nonstop right now. I'm trying to figure out if this has always been the way or if this is just new to now.
Well, I think we're kind of in unprecedented times, not to use that thing that's been beat to death, but we're in unprecedented times where the media is able to get so much more traction based on scaring the crap out of people. Now you've got the Delta variant and people are talking about the Lambda variant. And I'm sure that there's somebody sitting in an editorial office somewhere in Toronto who's just foaming at the mouth, waiting for their chance to say it's the Omega variant, right? And it's indicative of the dying media, right? Where you've got these big, just overstuffed businesses that have been usurped by lean enterprises, and they don't want to adapt because, hey, when I was coming up, I had some staffer getting me coffee all the time. I need to have a staffer getting me coffee all the time. Well, that costs money, right? And then you got guys like you and me and all the other online media presences that don't have that. They just get their own damn coffee and save on the expenses, and they're able to do this a lot cheaper a lot faster and frankly a lot better.
Well, you get to. I'm learning off of you, listening to your podcast, how much, and I know we talked about this last time, how much like time and effort you put into each one, right? You can really see the research coming through what you do, right? Like very well spoken on what you're talking about, and you're great at injecting a little bit of humor. And so I'm trying to learn as I go to continue to do research. I always do research on guests, but like to actually do a little more research into what's actually happening, because it is the one great thing about a podcast is you can literally hear the conversation. It's not, there's one thing I hate about mainstream media is they'll take an hour long sit down with somebody, cut it to 2 minutes, and you can't figure out what the hell they're talking about. And whereas everyone, like, as time rapidly moves forward, everybody's switching over to like how many people 5 years ago listened to podcasts? How many people now listen to podcasts? Like everybody. It is wild. It is wild.
And there's something to be said for boiling stuff down. Like when they take an hour-long conversation and turn it into 2 minutes, that's taking things a bit too far. But like my approach is just to be, get in, listen, get out. I'm going to give you the Coles notes of everything. I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts, and we can just take it from there, and you'll know enough to understand what I'm talking about, and you'll be able to get the jokes. Whereas if I just went in and just had like a 30-second clip here and there or something like that, none of it would really make any sense. And so they classically did that because they had to fill the time with advertisement blocks. We're going to break for 5 minutes for commercials. We're going to break for another 5 minutes for commercials, right? And nobody likes that, and you lose the flow of it. Whereas we can just sit down and talk, and a podcast might have some at the start or the end. The odd one has a little bit in the middle too, but you really don't lose that flow. Like once you get going, you're on that train.
Yeah, you're on the train, baby. And there's nothing better. You talk about being tired after doing these. Man, I get such a mental high. Like, I was saying, the wife and kids are down in the States, and I sound like I don't know. Everybody tells me I should be like, oh, celebrate your single bachelor life again. And I'm just like, well, I was saying it. Like after day 1.5, I'm like, God, it's quiet in this house. I just need, and it didn't help that it's July long, so everybody's gone, right? That probably didn't help. But I'm just like, hey, I need something. So today I'm like, well, I get to do a podcast. All right, I'm fired up. Like, and there's some crap going on, man. And I wasn't gonna, honest to God, there's a bunch of it I wasn't gonna talk about, but I got American friends, viewers, everything that keep texting me about and we're going to get into a little bit of the church burning, the statues, everything going on in Canada, because, it's a bit wild right now. It's a little the Wild West right now.
It's crazy. It's the same thing that happened a year and a half ago with the rail blockades. And this is just the updated version of it. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, what's the next thing going to be, right? Is it going to be some university buildings and just to be clear, I mean, all of this is bad. I'm not going to be saying, let's go burn down Lakeland College or something like that. I'm just saying that it makes you curious, because the reason why it keeps going, I think, is just that these people are emboldened. And I don't think the people doing it are the ones that feel affected by the unmarked graves that have been found and things like that, right? I feel like this is just people who are like, oh, well, I could just burn this down and get away with it. That'd be really cool. And then they just go ahead and do it because that's the way their head works. I don't know. I don't really know much about the psychology of these things, but that's kind of how it makes sense to me.
Yeah, well, like I say, I don't have much room to talk about residential schools. Hell, until a year or two ago, I didn't realize there was a residential school at Onion Lake, which is like a stone throw from where I grew up. Yeah. And then you start doing a little bit of research and you're like, holy crap. Like, wow, this is a lot closer to home than I thought it was. And so like, I have very little room to talk. Like you can understand everybody's like, man, when they're getting close to 1,000 kids and they've only started just the tip of the iceberg, 1,000 unmarked graves, it's like, oh, this is like, I don't want to, like, what can I say? Like, honest to God, right? Like, can you imagine if the government walked in tomorrow and said, we're taking your kids and you don't got any saying about it? I tell you what, we would revolt. Like, the entire population would be like, not a chance. And to think in our own country, across pretty much every province, I believe PEI and what is it, New Brunswick, maybe? One of those, one of the other
probably didn't have much either.
didn't have much. It's like, it's really tough to talk about because, like, you understand, like, I can understand, like, what went on. Not good. Not good.
Oh, absolutely not. It was horrible.
But now they're ripping down statues. They're burning churches, and I'm like, okay. And actually, I should back up a second. I say they are. I don't know who they are anyways, because I read an article yesterday, and it was a peaceful protester in Vancouver said, we didn't do anything with the statue, right? We had this beautiful, peaceful protest, and then, it was a group of people later on that went and ripped down the statue, and it's like, I don't know. And nothing happens with it. I don't know what to do. I'm just sitting here watching this all go down and being like, I don't know what to say. I honestly don't.
Well, it makes you wonder if it's almost, and this might sound a little bit crazy, but it makes you wonder if it's some type of a thing from somewhere up on high where they're saying this is going to be too big of a political fallout to get in the way of it. So just whoever wants to knock down a statue, just let them be. Because from what I understand, that's pretty much what happened in Winnipeg was you had a whole bunch of cops standing around watching them pull down that statue of Queen Victoria. Right. And you'd think as a cop, you say, okay, well, that's illegal, and I'm here, and I have been entrusted with upholding the law by the people who I represent. Maybe I should go over them and tell them to just take a walk, right? Instead of just being like, oh, well, let's bust out the popcorn. I guess this is going to be interesting. I might be on the news, right? It honestly makes you wonder. And especially when you look at the fact that no one's been apprehended in any of this stuff and no one's been caught doing it. Like as soon as the first few happened, as a cop, you'd have to say, well, logically, this is going to continue. And so if you're in some rural district that has a nice old church, like
Morinville was the place.
Morinville, yeah.
Like
you'd think whatever, I don't know if they have a local detachment or there's one in a nearby community or something like that, but that old historic church, that video of it burning down, it breaks your heart, right? Regardless of your religious proclivities, right? And so you'd think, okay, well, you know what? We've got this old church. Let's just set somebody watching there for a day or two and we'll make sure that no shenanigans happen. Like that would be the first thing I would think of. And yet not a single cop seems to have done that nationwide. And like, there's that one that got graffitied in downtown Vancouver. You're like, okay, well, maybe that one might have slipped through the cracks because they'd be looking more to the cathedral type things or something like that.
Yeah.
But still, even that, how many people buy orange paint on a regular basis? You could just go around to a couple hardware stores and just be like, hey, have there been any white women buying orange paint in the past couple days? Cool. Can I see your footage? Oh, we got a credit card going along with it. Thanks. We're going to go arrest them. Right? I mean, it's not exactly hard-nosed detective work. This isn't something that takes like the first 3 acts of a movie to unfold. And yet there seems to be no steps towards any of it in any direction. And it's just absolutely baffling. And the only thing that really makes sense is if they're somehow being told that this isn't a priority. And it makes you wonder, like, maybe if that is what's the case, and you've seen like a couple unconfirmed accounts on Twitter saying like, I'm a cop and I've been told to look the other way on this stuff and to make sure I prosecute that stuff. And whether that's the actual case or not, I'd feel a lot better about our police if we had some kind of a rule in place that said that if there was going to be selective enforcement of laws, it had to be documented.
That if there's going to be selective enforcement of laws, documented. Explain that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not great with ranks in the police force or anything.
Sure.
Like
Yeah. I get it.
But let's say just some beat cop constable or something like that, gets told by a staff sergeant, yeah, they're tearing down a statue, just leave them be. And then they say, okay, that's cool. Remember, you got to get that in writing. And he says, yeah, okay. And then he's got to go to his boss and get that in writing. And it just goes up the chain until there's some accountability. And whether that ends up with like the police chief or like the head of the RCMP or something like that, it's the only way that you could ever have something where you could definitively say this person, because you just go up the chain until there was no more paperwork, and you'd say this is the person that made the call and they need to answer for the fallout of that decision.
Nobody's ever going to do that. They
Perfect.
will
then just enforce all the laws unilaterally, because some constable that's working the street isn't going to say, I'm going to lose my job over this because there's no paperwork. He's going to say, if you want me to do this, it has to be documented, right? It's CYA stuff. And there's so much of it in the private side of the world. Why can't we have it on the public sector too?
Yeah, I just laugh. The documentation thing. There's no way that they're gonna say, yeah, we let a mob go do a bunch of stuff and have that on somebody's email chain of like, yeah, here's the email saying don't do anything with it. Can you imagine how explosive that'd be if that came out?
That's the whole point, right? Is that I'm a big fan of just blanket enforcement of the law. If you break a law, I don't care if you're old or young or black or white, or if you've had a hard life or whatever it is, if you're breaking the law, you're breaking the law. And if someone in one of the people we entrust to look after these laws and make sure that they're upheld, if they're going to say, I'm going to look the other way, it has to be either a decision they make or a decision they've been told to make. And if they're making that decision, then the onus should fall on them. And if they've been told that, there needs to be some daylight on all of this stuff. There's so much stuff in government and the public sector where we, as the people who pay for it, never see what exact decisions are made or who makes them. And then there's no way to hold anybody accountable, because this is a shit show right now. And it's the same thing that happened with the rail blockades, where they only stopped when you had guys in Edmonton that just showed up, grabbed all the crap off the tracks, threw it in trucks, and tore off out of there. That was like, it was just the mildest form of vigilante justice you could ever think of, really. But how many people are sitting in church towers right now with their hunting rifle? I bet you there's at least one. It's a pretty big country, and that's not something that anybody wants.
I had to chuckle at your Twitter today. The rooftop Koreans.
Yeah.
I did not. Full disclosure, I saw that and I'm like, rooftop Koreans. What is he talking about? And then I did a deep dive into that. Holy Dinah. So back in, what was it, 1992?
Yep, April 29th, 1992.
There you go.
I wrote a song about it, right? There was all the LA riots, and when they started getting close to the Korean section of town, there was just a whole bunch of Koreans who went on their rooftops with rifles and made everybody really aware of the fact that you're welcome to come over here, but you're not going to be met with a warm welcome.
Well, and the crazy thing about the articles that I read was, you know, when you talk about police enforcement and everything else, now this is going to our friends to the south, and we're talking about LA, which is a giant city, but they talked about containment in that with the riots. And so when it got to Koreatown, they just set up blockades and basically no cops were coming in to help. And that's why, from what I read, that's why they get on top of the roof, because all their businesses are getting broken into. They're just getting destroyed and the cops are doing nothing. So what do? They sit up on top and, you know, let some warning shots go to let them know, hey, like you say, you want to come this way, that's fine, but just be known, we're sitting here. I was like, oh, like, you know, you want to talk about all these statues, and I guess like my curiosity always comes back to, like, has this been going on forever? And then I read the rooftop Koreans and I'm like, well, it has been going on. It's been going on for at least 20 some years, because I mean, you go back to then and that's going on. Not much has changed, a lot of people say, down in the States, especially in a place like LA.
Yeah, well, it's not as though it's been a constant thing, but it rears its ugly head every once in a while. And I think so much of it is just enabling the people to do it and get away with it, and unofficially making it known that they're not going to face repercussions for any of this. Look at the looting last year and all the rioting with the whole Black Lives Matter stuff. If like on day one, and it's the same thing with the rail blockades, the first time it happened, if the cops showed up and they're just like, shut it all down, dismantle it, everybody's in paddy wagons, do you think it would have happened again? You had how many trillions probably that just got burned in businesses and homes, and how many lives were lost after this whole thing started. And all of that would have been really simple to stop if just the first person who tried to do it, you were like, nope, not on my watch.
Do you think, though, the rail blockade, I'll agree with you on that one. The George Floyd Black Lives Matter, I don't know if you could have stopped that. Like, that was like, once everybody saw the video of the cop kneeling and everything, like it was just waiting for a spark. And if it wasn't George Floyd, it would have been somebody else. Because if you look at the history of the United States, that was just bound to happen at some point in the next day, 6 days, whatever. And I just felt like they were just sitting there waiting. Like, they were organized, and when it came, boom, it was like everywhere. And if you're a police force, like, how do you get ahead of that?
Well, you got to start calling out the media. Like, if you talk to anybody in the States, I'm sure that they think that cops kill unarmed Black people regularly. Like, it's almost something they do. Oh, you know what? I got a coffee break coming up. I got to make sure I could kill another Black guy first before I clock out, kind of thing, right? And it's not like that at all. There's very few instances of that happening. But the problem is that it's this huge sensation because the media, their media establishments are dying too. And so the only stuff that they can get traction on, it's not like you and I just having regular conversations. It's they need something big. And so rather than having somebody on who just has a reasonable conversation about it and says, well, like, it sucked, it should have never happened, and they absolutely need to do everything they can to make sure that this doesn't happen as much as possible, right? I mean, on an infinite timeline, there's going to be stuff like that. It's sadly inevitable, right? I mean, cops are dealing with a lot of life and death situations. But if you actually had somebody who went on a CNN panel and said, well, you know what? Here's some non-misleading statistics. Here's an honest conversation about this. People be like, oh, okay, well, you know what? It sucks. We really need to improve this, but maybe we don't burn down car dealerships.
Yeah, it seems to be. Media is such an interesting thing to me because even us two, right? Like, I mean, we could talk about whatever Twos wants to talk about. We could go shine a light on, I don't know. Today we're going to spotlight the fact the Stampede is not really going to be the Stampede this year, and we could just blast about everything going on with the Calgary Stampede. So with
literally anything, we could just sit here and talk about fishing for an hour if you want.
That's right. But I mean, I'm choosing, I guess, to talk about, because I didn't, I was like, I don't know, I really don't want to. I don't even know how to talk about this. Like, I'm ill prepared to talk about such things because I didn't grow up in it, right? But in saying that, when enough of my listeners,
oh yeah, go ahead.
But I was going to say, when enough of my listeners start texting me about it, I'm like, geez, like, I suppose we should at least try and approach the subject. And honestly, a guy should probably have on some people. Like, I know different people through the community who either survived the residential school. Is that what we're saying? I don't know. Went to the residential school, had family members. Maybe it's good that people hear and listen to stuff like this.
Yeah.
The Black Lives Matter thing, man, that is a juggernaut of, it just was like, I just go back. It was a haystack waiting for a little spark, and away she went.
Mhm.
And when they found their target, boom, off it went. And not that George Floyd was the target. Dear God, don't cut that out. But like you said, on a never-ending timeline, eventually something stupid is going to happen. And any organization as big as the cops, you're always going to have bad ones. Always.
Mhm.
You're going to have shady shit go down all the time. Just because the timeline is infinite and they're in a position of power. Look at government right now, right? Like, the longer the liberals are in government, I just go like, they can't even last 5 days without another like scandal of like epic proportion and stupidity. And I just go like, but this is going to continue to go on. Like, it's just going to continue to go on.
Well, it's gotten to the point where they don't even all get reported anymore. Like, I talked about this last summer. I said, and I just randomly, somebody liked this. Every once in a while, you ever notice someone will just like an archive tweet of yours, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I totally forgot about that. And so I can't even remember which scandal it was because there's been so many, but I just commented on the fact that there are so many that the mainstream media doesn't even bother reporting them all anymore because it's really not even news at this point. Like, it's every damn day there's something new. Like, you just found out Blacklocks, who do amazing work, and they're pretty much the only people who go out of their way to be just no spin, just, hey, look, we did a freedom of information request. Here's what we found. And I feel like kind of the one thing maybe holding them back a little bit is that their tweets don't read very well. But guys, if you're listening, I love you and you do an awesome job. But they just found out that Trudeau had signed off on us prepaying for a bunch of vaccines from China that we never got. And that directly contradicted something that he had said in question period. So he straight up lied about it in question period. And so, I mean, where do we go from there? Do we just start calling it lies period? It wouldn't be wrong.
Well, I think as I get older, I'm starting to understand that there probably are politicians who tell the truth at all times, et cetera, stand up human beings. But, you know, one of the most popular presidents in U.S. history, in Bill Clinton, was a guy who lied on, like, everybody remember. I did not, you know, right? Like, I remember sitting there, and then it comes out, oh yeah, that did, and you're like, what are we teaching our young kids? And you talk about Trudeau, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't get anything about it. I'm trying so hard to be like, no, there's probably, you know, Sean, don't jump to conclusions. Don't go down that rabbit hole. Like, try and read. Let's see what the other side says. And I just can't see it anymore. Like, I'm so far getting you just ran through the hedges, man, like 17 times. It's like, was the guy, it's like, he's a mile from the bar. It's 2 a.m. He's got 18 cans in his truck. People seen him leaving the scene. But maybe he only ran through one hedge. So maybe it was a deer and he wasn't drinking. It's like, eventually the evidence is so clear. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't know. You talk about police work. It's like, now 1 + 1 = 2, sir. You're going to the slammer. You've been drinking and driving and be done. With Trudeau and everything, I'm just like, I can't figure it out. And on top of it all, mainstream media just paints him in such a light that hurts my brain. It hurts my brain.
Well, you had Pierre Poilievre a few weeks ago saying that the CBC should just move into the Prime Minister's communications office. And you had, oh shoot, his name's eluding me. I talked about him on my last episode of the podcast. But you've got one of these guys who's just been this long-standing journalist in Canada. He's worked for everybody, including the CBC, all over the world. And he went off about how one-sided they were covering the Green Party meltdown, where Annamie Paul is the leader, and she's facing vote of non-confidence. And she called out Trudeau, who sniped one of her only members of parliament, and saying that he's a fake feminist and all this stuff, and like just really laid into him in a press conference. And CBC The National was like, so in other news today, Justin is super dreamy. Right? And he's just like, this is crazy. Like, how can you possibly try to pretend that you're nonpartisan in this? And this is a guy who's pretty well established as being nonpartisan. So it's not even as though you've got the guys.
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that too. I listened like your last podcast. Yeah, because I remember. I want to know who the journalist is.
Oh shoot, I could look it up here real quick if you want.
While you're looking it up,
yeah.
I wanted to lead off. With I'm a hockey guy. Everybody knows.
Yeah.
I got missing teeth. I play hockey. Whatever. The Stanley Cup playoffs are going on. When Montreal, Alan Fryer,
guy's name. Yeah.
I'm going to look up that guy because that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one thing when you've got the people who are typically opposed to the CBC, who, guys like me, where granted, there's lots of examples, but typically I don't really have anything good to say about them. And then now you're getting to the point where the people who are kind of staying out of it and just trying to be in the middle, like, you got to look out when the people who don't want to get involved decide to stake their claim.
Well, that's a very good point, right? Like, even the people who don't want to say anything are like, oh man, this is getting a little bit absurd.
Yeah. But anyways, that's it. So going into hockey.
Well, I had to laugh. So it's 3 weeks ago. So it was right after Montreal beat the Winnipeg Jets. So now they're the only Canadian team left in the Stanley Cup Finals. So what does the CN Tower do? They light up in Montreal Canadiens colors. Now, personally, I give two craps what Toronto does. They want to support Montreal. That's great. I try and pull it back to me, and I go, I might disown the Edmonton Oilers if Edmonton flew Calgary Flames colors, right? Like that's what Montreal and Toronto is. They're this huge rival. Toronto loses to Montreal, and then
that's how it all started, right? And yeah, well, I mean, okay.
I was watching a Toronto news station, a young girl, and a reporter, an older man. And the older man said, normally I like to stay out of it. And he starts ranting about it. And she goes, well, can't we all just be friends? And it's like, well, no. I'm not saying you got to hate Montreal, but I don't need to fly their colors just because they knocked us out of the playoffs. Like, can we not understand that is absolutely absurd?
It's interesting because it's probably one of the only gestures that we've seen in Canada in a very long time that's any attempt to bridge a divide between two people. And like, you talk about the Flames and the Oilers, I got to be honest with you, man. I haven't thought of the Oilers as being a rival in years. Like, you guys are in what, like your fifth decade of a building year? Come on, right? And it's like when your 4-year-old cousin wants to wrestle with you, right? You're like, okay, yeah, come on, buddy, it'll be fun.
You're a dick.
Yes, I am.
Oh, well, I tell you what. Would you want Calgary? They didn't make the playoffs. Would you want them flying the Edmonton Oilers colors?
No, but
you know what? We're gonna open up the Saddle Dome and we're gonna stream the Oiler games for anybody who wants to come down and watch. What? Like, come on! Like, they're a rival. This is sports. We're supposed to be competitive. We're not supposed to.
Well, that's a little bit different, though, because now that becomes a potential for a money-making opportunity, right? Because the Saddle Dome, they only have so many games a year. And believe it or not, the Flames haven't been going out of their way to give them extra ones in the spring. So, yeah, if they're like, hey, you know what? If we could pack a few thousand idiots in here that want to cheer for this god-awful fucking team, then, yeah, maybe we can sell some popcorn, right? Because the building's not doing anything, because we kind of had it booked off on the off chance that the Flames would make it to the second round. And now that that's totally gone out the window, yeah, sure, let's sell a few beer. Right?
You want to talk about wrestling with your 4-year-old cousin? Johnny Goudreau is like your 4-year-old cousin. That guy is the reason why you guys are nowhere. He is a ghost.
No, man, it's the guys 2-3 levels up from the coach that are. I mean, we've been trying the same thing for how long with no results, and it's the same thing they tried with Ginla and Kiprasov. practically 15 years ago. It's just like, let's get one good guy and let's build a team around it. And then, okay, well, we're going to have a goalie play 80 games a season. Like, that's just ridiculous. Get some depth in your bench, right? But they're just like, well, because everybody loved Iggy, and Iggy's a beauty. Like,
hey, I will say this right now.
Yeah.
Iggy is my favorite Flame. It's hard not to like that guy. And he played the game the right way.
Yeah. I mean, he did everything, right? I mean, if someone needed their teeth knocked out, he would knock them out. And if someone needed a goal scored, he would score a goal. But pretty much he scored every goal for a few years in a row. And you're just like, you can't just build it around one guy unless his name is Wayne. That's it.
Yeah,
right?
but even Wayne, think of the Oilers back then. Oh, wait. They had all-stars or Hall of Famers like, I don't know, Mark Messier, Yari Curry, this guy named Paul Coffey. Oh, I don't know, one of the greatest goaltenders ever, Grant Fuhr. Like, oh, wait, Andy Moog was sitting in the background there. Like, all these names started going around. It wasn't just Wayne.
Okay, hear me out on this, though. And I'm not going to take too much away from them because I'm pretty sure they can skate a little bit better than me, right? But if you're playing with a guy who has more assists than anybody else does goals, you're going to rack up some numbers too, right? And honestly, at what point, Grant Fuhr, yeah, beauty, great guy, had an awesome career. But at what point are the Oilers going to retire a jersey for cocaine?
Two's calling out the Oilers and their cocaine habit?
Oh, man. And you know what? Some of these guys are probably friends of the show, and they all hate me now. I don't know. It's all good, guys. I'll have a beer with you one of these days if you want.
If you were in the 80s and you weren't doing cocaine in the professional sports, you were probably a nobody.
That's fair.
Right? That was the high time. And saying all that, the Oilers were more than just Wayne. I will give you that Wayne, no different than McDavid right now. Like, yeah. Can he drive a team? Abso-freaking-lutely. But man, like you go back and watch some of those old games in the playoffs. I'm not talking the regular season, in playoffs. We talking about playoffs? Talking about playoffs. It takes a team to win in the playoffs because you can shut Wayne Gretzky down in the playoffs. They just did it to McDavid. Like they just.
Oh yeah.
Like, and if you don't have, you talk about depth, man. Like, maybe Holland. I'm really hoping Holland's is gonna be the GM to figure it out here. But like, we just need you can't have McDavid and Draisaitl score every single goal.
No, you can't.
If you're the opposing team, well, what do? Well, you lean on those players, and sure, they're going to score still.
That's what Winnipeg did, right?
Right. They just leaned on them, and Vegas did it to Colorado too, right? That line of McKinnon and them were holy Dinah. But like game 3, 4, like they just understood if we shut down this line, they have nothing else. Now I'm being exaggerating a bit, but you kind of get the point.
Yeah, and I don't really know too much about the dollars and cents when you get into it too much, but I feel like probably the driving thing behind that, because the Flames keep trying to do it, and you see other teams trying to do it too, is that they probably get more jersey sales out of having one breakout star than about having them from having a solid team.
You know what? Fuck that. Tell me how many jerseys you sell if you make the conference finals. How many beers you sell? Now, we don't got anybody in the stadium, you know, like it's just whatever. Get me ranted on that. But like, how much jerseys, memorabilia, everything do you sell if you have a long playoff run? Heck, you got Toronto flying the Montreal colors because they're the only Canadian team left. Like, I laugh. It would have been cool to see it lit up in Oiler colors. I would have been like, well, hell, thanks, Toronto. Like,
are they even really all that Canadian though? Quebec just got Quebec just got declared its own unique nation.
Did it?
Or whatever. So, I mean, are they going to become the Montreal Unique Nations?
Right? Fill me in on this. They're wanting to be
C96.
Yeah,
right?
Fire it off for me.
The exact wording of it, me at the moment, right?
Layman's
terms. I didn't realize we were gonna. Okay, so they're their own unique nation, and French is their only language.
So they've gotten rid of anything to do with English.
on paper, right? And so it's interesting. It actually ties into what we wanted to talk about a little bit later. And in saying that, maybe I should have read up a little bit more about it. But like provincially, they're passing a bunch of laws that like all the elevator music has to be French and things like that. Like you can't, anytime you're playing music in a public area, it has to be French. I don't think it's going to apply to bars and pubs and stuff like that, because that would just be, I think, a bridge too far. But it's really setting it up to try and maintain their culture through legislation.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that if the only way you can do that is through legislation, it probably sucks and you might want to let it go. And like, honestly, really, I mean, like the problem is with this kind of legislation, like there was a study done a little while ago that said that having Canada be officially bilingual costs us something like an extra $2.5 billion a year in terms of the increased salaries for people who are bilingual and the translators you need to make sure that you get signs right, and just the
infrastructure there to keep it in place, right? Just to maintain
like,
it.
It's this whole biosphere of government enforced bureaucracy and added expense, and then you've also got to enforce things, right? Because I mean, there's no sense in having a rule you're not enforcing. So now you've got to have language police that go to places in Quebec and say that the font size isn't right for the English stuff, which literally happens, and those people are getting paid.
Can you imagine that job?
Yeah, like
what do you do?
Can you read a measuring tape? Oh, c'est bon. You are, how you say, hired.
You know, back when I worked for the city of Lloyd, I was a city worker for like 1 month of my life. Worked the graveyard. It was interesting. Mm-hmm. There was a guy who literally drove around every single day, Monday through Friday, spraying puddles to keep the mosquitoes from, So he drove around and sprayed puddles. That's all he did all day long. That's what taxpayers' dollars were paying for. Yep. I'm like, you're telling me at some point there was a meeting convened and said our mosquito population is too high. We need to set one guy on this, and all he's going to do is drive the streets looking for puddles and spray them.
Mosquitoes fascinate me. Like you go out into a ball diamond, you're out in outfield, and you're like, there's nothing around here for mosquitoes to survive on except for like the guys who were here yesterday. And I am getting eaten alive. Like, what do they live on? Like, there's nothing out there. It's not like it's a pasture during the day and then they just move all the cattle out and play ball, right? Like there's nothing for them to feed on, but still they're just like out in these huge numbers, and you're just swatting like 5 of them at a time with your glove. And like I don't know. I need to crack the brain of a biologist on this one of these days
and see what they do.
Going on. Yeah.
Twos plays. You're a ball guy then. You play a little slow pitch, fastball,
everything guy.
Baseball.
To be honest with you, all just slow pitch and fastball growing up. Don't really. The only thing I really play much of nowadays is volleyball, and that hasn't been going on for a couple of years. I guess golf too, right? But I mean, like I grew up in a town where if you didn't play every sport, you didn't have a team, right?
I can relate. Yes.
It's funny. Like I hated curling growing up. And I was like, oh, I got to be on the team. And then like, can you be the skip? And I'm like, fine. And then, once I reached adulthood and it became a novelty thing, it was like, oh, there's a bonspiel going on. I'm in. And curling's awesome, right? But I would have never got to that stage if I hadn't been forced to play it as a kid. So it worked out really well in some ways.
Curling's one thing I never grew up playing. The Hillmon tore down the curling rink. So I literally I suck at curling. Like if there's one sport that makes me extremely uncomfortable that has nothing to do with how tall I am, because I mean that's a different story in basketball or volleyball for that matter, is curling. I suck at it. I am so un-Canadian when it comes to curling. You'd think all Canadians wake up and all they do is skate on the ice and throw curling stones at different times of the day.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm kind of the same way, but in hockey, I'll say that's the one sport I never really got into that much. Because when I was about 9 or so, our rink got tore down. Same thing as you, right? And so, that fell by the wayside. And I think there was 2 or 3 guys my age who went like a couple towns over and joined that team. But now, how do you go to your folks and say, I need you to take me a half hour for every practice? And yeah, I'm sure they carpooled, right? I can't remember. It was a pretty long time ago, but it's a pretty big time commitment right there. Just to be like, you're going to go 2 towns over every time you want to put a stick on the ice. And so my parents were like, nope, you could do whatever else. Here's a horse.
Here's a horse. Now, going back to this Quebec thing for 1 second, does this open up like a way for the West to be its own then? By Quebec saying that it's its own and it's going to,
It
like,
does, but it doesn't. Because, Quebec's done a lot of things on their own already. They've got their own pension plan. They collect taxes on their own. There's a lot of things that they do that are uniquely Quebec's that other provinces don't. And there are a lot of things that Buffalo Report or Buffalo, whatever it was basically just saying that Alberta should have its own RCMP, collect its own taxes, and have its own pension plan. And, things like that Quebec's already doing. And Alberta got nothing but pushback about it because, hey, all of a sudden you're being a bunch of dicks. And you're like, but they're doing the exact same thing. Are they being a bunch of dicks? Well, no, we need them to vote for us. So just sit down and pay for them.
It's funny because when I hear it said, I hear Quebec is protecting their culture. They're protecting they're ensuring and blah, 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 and all these like nice little words that make you, that seems like when the West talks about any of it, I hear you bunch of bigots and hillbillies and whatever. And it's all just in how it's framed. And the framing, we haven't, well, I don't know. Maybe we're starting to figure it out, but certainly doesn't feel like our framing of the situation and what they're trying to do has been framed the right way. Or maybe that's just going to take some time.
Well, I think that when you think about Quebec culture, you think about, fancy old buildings and poutine and maple syrup and not ever winning a war. And when you think about West, typically, what's the stereotypical Western culture? It's some rodeos and rolling coal and
farming, cattle, oil.
Yes, absolutely, right. But when they think, when the rest of Canada thinks about the West, it's a bunch of rib pigs with big dips in their lips, just burning diesel, right? And not really giving a crap about any of it. And like, that's the culture you guys want? And that isn't the culture of the West. The culture of the West is, because the thing about it is that most of the people who are in Western Canada now came all the way from the East Coast. They got off the boats in Halifax, right? And so they're like, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to stop off here. I'm not going to stop off there. I'm not going to stop off at the next place. I'm going to keep going. And if you go back 100, 120 years ago, Saskatchewan and Alberta were the same size. And actually, I think Saskatchewan was a bit bigger at some point, right? But Alberta decided to elect some governments, and it's cause and effect, I guess, correlation and causation. But in my opinion, Alberta decided to have this long-term dedication to having more business-friendly environment. And it was a lot more conducive because it's not like the oil just magically stops where they just happened to decide that the border was, right? And there's still just as much oil in Saskatchewan as there is in Alberta, but it made a lot more sense at the time for companies to plant their roots in Alberta. And so you've got this mentality of working hard and making something of yourself and making something for yourself and your family. And it's a damn shame. But when people think about Western Canada, that's what they should be thinking about. Not just,
rig pigs and stereotype, right? Like, I don't know. I come from Dad really pushed on me to read Fort Pitt Trails. It was about the settlers who came across and their stories from, the early 1900s. Man, it's a special type of person who did that, right? Like load up your 3 kids and wife and take a boat across to a country you've never been to take a train to Winnipeg, to take another train to Saskatoon to hop off to get your wagon cart that you didn't know if it was going to be there or not, to have some old military tent for what you're going to camp in, to then take this trail all the way to Lloydminster and then get given a chunk of land where you have never farmed before. So you don't know what the hell you're getting yourself into, to the complete wilderness, and then to try and figure that out, build a place, which you've never done before, and then survive minus 40. Yeah, that's the stories we should be talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, these are the people who built this, right? And they're the people whose mentalities still pervade today to some extent. Anyways, you could argue a little bit about that, but I mean, that's when you think about Western Canada, that's the kind of stuff you should be thinking about. And it's too bad because it's not as, I don't know, people like ripping on other people, right? And I mean, yeah, like I love to rip on Manitoba, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. Like, it's just when you've got the
there's a
driver,
friendly rivalry between Saskatchewan and Manitoba. That is fair.
Yeah, but it's kind of hard to look and say that for decades, the economic engine that has driven this country, and it's paid for the universities in Quebec and the roads in Ontario and all of, I'm going to catch some hell for this, but I'm going to say it anyway, all of the unemployment in the Maritimes has been Alberta, right? And it's a hell of a lot easier to just be like, well, they're a bunch of dicks, than to say, okay, well, you know what, maybe they do have a point.
The question is then, because like to me, how do you open up the dial? Is this politicians that don't want to do this? Because it'd be really terrible to get like people actually talking and being like, oh, actually, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know, and agreeing on some things and like doing some good things for the country. Is there just no way to open up that dialogue so that you can have conversations where you're like, actually, Alberta's pretty great. And just like every other province in our beautiful country, it has a couple flaws, but overall, it's pretty good. And on top of that, it provides a lot of income, a lot of dollars for the entire country.
I got a big government solution. So this is going to sound a little bit out of character, but it's something that I think would help. And I think it's a damn shame that our government, who's got laws about everything else on the planet, hasn't looked at doing something like this. So if you fly into Reykjavik in Iceland, they've got this government program in place where you can delay, like, because it's usually just layovers in Iceland heading off to whatever point you're going to in Europe, right? And so it's a big hub. It's a feeder hub for Europe from North America. And so they've got a thing in place that you can delay your connecting flight for up to a week at no extra charge.
Okay.
And so if you're going to Denmark or Spain or whatever, you can be like, oh, well, for no extra cost aside from what I want to spend there, I can also include Iceland in my trip for up to a week. Well, yeah, why wouldn't I do that, right? And then you've got these people that would normally just be laying over for an hour in the airport and maybe having a beer and some $8 pretzels. Instead, they're spending a week in hotels and sightseeing and eating that fermented fish or whatever it is that they have that they make underneath the docks and all that stuff, right? And it's interesting that Canada, for being such a big place, it's funny that we don't do more to try and actually have people seeing a lot of it. Like, there's so many people that have only seen one or two provinces, or like I've been all over Western Canada. Well, I've been all over Saskatchewan and Alberta. I've seen a lot of northern BC, and I've spent next to no time in Ontario. Like I was like in Toronto for about 4 days once.
Yep.
And I spent a bit of time in Quebec and like a week in Halifax, and that's it. Like that's pretty much all I've seen. Yeah, okay, Vancouver Island and stuff too, right? But I mean, that's it. There's still a whole hell of a lot there. I mean, I hardly know anything about the topography of Winnipeg other than the fact that it's very, very constant, which is a lot coming from a guy from Saskatchewan, but whatever, right? But if like on Twitter, you get to know people from all over the country, but how many people actually ever go visit other parts of it?
So what you're saying is in order to open up a dialogue between the country is instead of getting people to talk, let them come see and experience, and then that changes their mind because seeing is believing.
I think it would help a lot because I mean everybody's a lot nicer to talk to in person, right? And so, you go someplace, like how many places in the world have you traveled to where you're like everybody there is a dick? Not
Zero.
very many.
Zero.
Right.
I will say I will say in France they were a different breed. I got elbowed by a grandmother. That was interesting. But in saying that, I mean, what can I say? I don't speak the language, so it'd be very, very difficult. But you're right. One of the things I defend about Canada is I've been across the entire country. Lived in Ontario for 3 years and have
sorry to hear that.
Northern Ontario. It's a different world from the southern part. And I met so many good people across our country. I like what you're once again though. It's like a level-headed idea that probably will never ever bear fruit, because what you're saying is if there was a way we could spur on travel within our own country so that people could experience it, see it, understand how beautiful the Maritimes are, or how beautiful, if you're on that side, how beautiful the other side of the country is.
Yep.
Make it effective, cost effective, so it wasn't a bazillion dollars to go from one side to the other.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it'll only cost you an extra couple $100 to go to Ireland than Toronto. So why would you go to Toronto, right?
That's right.
And then also it would help the economy, right?
Yeah, because now you're spurring on your 38 million and change people to stay within the country and go see it and experience it.
And so here's Two's advocating for a planned economy. How about that?
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
I had to go back to, I didn't realize this. You were talking about Iceland's, the dish that they have is, I don't even know how to say it. Hakarl? Like is that even, it's referred to as fermented shark, is a national dish of Iceland consisting of a Greenland shark or other sleeper shark that has been cured with a particular fermentation process and hung to dry for, I assume that's going to say 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, so I mean, I've never.
Oh no, 4 or 5 months. 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, and they just put it underneath the docks or whatever.
It has a strong ammonia-rich smell and fishy taste. But it's saying that I now I'm interested.
I kind of want to try it. I've never been a huge fan of ammonia for the most part, but I mean, when in Rome, right? I've spent a lot of time in Denmark over the years, and they've got this shot that they do called Fisk, and it's kind of this fermented fish liqueur.
Yeah.
And it is just god awful. But anytime you go out for beers, they're like, oh, let's get around to Fisk. Let's get around to Fisk. And you'll drink a whole bottle of the damn stuff. And you just like it. I mean, it's like if Jägermeister went bad the same way milk does, and you let it not quite solidify, maybe is kind of what it is. And
sounds lovely.
Oh yes, it's absolutely wonderful. And then everybody you talk to, you can't just go out and have a pint. Everybody wants to drink Fisk all the time. You're just like, oh God.
Well, Finland had I'm forgetting right now. Like I can't remember if it was reindeer piss or moose piss. It doesn't matter. It was a homemade liqueur that was brown and there was some texture in it, let me tell you. And we would sauna and then get out of the sauna and drink some moose piss or reindeer piss and then get back in. And you just over and over and over again. And I was like, this is something like, well, you talk about experiences change how people think, right? Like conversation's good for people to listen to, but actually going and experiencing some of these things just open their eyes up to like what goes on. And moose piss, that's something I'll never forget.
Yeah, well, I mean, beer fest, right? Like, if you can drink ram's piss, fuck, you can drink anything.
You know, doing this, I wanted to talk about Bill C-10. You know, when Bill C-10 gets rammed through in the middle of the night, I went
1:30 in the morning.
I cannot wait to get Twos back on because you're my like leading expert of following the government trail of like debauchery. And the reason why C10, like, listen, I get what they're trying to do in theory on the way they'll play it is, listen, we don't want a bunch of hate out there, and we want to get rid of like people planning really nefarious things, and we want to get rid of some groups that maybe shouldn't be there, and we blah blah blah. But
that's more Bill C-36 than C-10.
Oh, really? Well, this is why you're on then.
All right. So let's do some Cole's notes here. So C-10 passed in the middle of the night, and it went to the Senate, and it went to the second reading of the Senate, but it hadn't been passed before they adjourned for the summer, because one of the very important pillars of Canadian democracy is that if you get to vote on your own working hours, you will vote to take the summer off. Okay. And so what they did was, it's kind of, I'd say it's sort of three parts mainly. Well, I'm not going to say three parts, but there's some distinct parts. So a whole lot of it is mandating protection for Francophone and, to a lesser extent, Indigenous language stuff, right? And so it's really setting things up so that if you're French and you want to do anything creative, you've got a government mandated audience. And so it's, again, believe it or not, our federal politicians trying to drum up support in Quebec, right? And then you've got another part of it that says that they want to do everything they can to make sure that they're capturing revenue from people creating and streaming and stuff like that. So that's why GST is now on Netflix. And so a lot of it is in terms of what you need to disclose. And it does have some things in there where if you're just like, well, I need this to be confidential, they can say, okay, well, that is confidential unless we find you in violation, in which case we'll totally dox you. And then they've got how the streaming services and whatnot are going to have mandatory Canadian content promotion. And so if you think about it, if you open up YouTube, it's kind of like a ladder. It's not literally, but the things you see at the first are the top rung, and then so on and down the ladder, right? And what they're saying is that you need to move the Canadian stuff up a few rungs, but then by default, you're moving other things down, right? Because if you just see Canadian stuff on your first splash of opening up YouTube, you're not going to see American stuff. And there's also some vague wording in that in terms of, I can't remember exactly how it was, and I didn't write it down, but it's something to the tune of they want things to promote political cohesion and be good for our culture and yada, yada, yada. And so, you look at that, and one of the main ideas behind C10 is that it's specifically written to be as vague as possible and leave the interpretation up to the CRTC, the Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Corporation, I think it is. But so they just said, we're going to make this broad and let this building full of government bureaucrats figure out what's going to work best for Canada. And that's just a really bad idea, right? And it actually says that if they make any modifications to how they're doing this, they don't need to present them before the Parliament. And it gives them nothing but autonomy and a really broad ability to just interpret things however they want. So let's say me, who's fairly critical of our government, and not just the Liberals, I rip into all of them pretty frequently, right? And let's say I am calling out Justin Trudeau for his latest scandal, which, I don't know, next week he's going to be found with fish face or something like that, right? I mean, who knows what it's going to be next? It's going to be some idiot thing that
no worries, he'll give you some ammo.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, I made this joke in the last podcast episode with Harjit Sajan. I was like, whether you're a military officer who wants to coerce a bunch of underling officers into having sex with you, or if you're some idiot who writes a podcast, Harjit Sajan is the gift that keeps on giving, right? And so, yeah, I mean, if I'm going to say stuff like that, they're going to say, well, that's kind of not really helping the cohesion and the political unity of Canada. So maybe you get knocked down to the point where no one's ever going to see it. I mean, when was the last time you were on page 2 of Google?
I have no idea.
Yeah. So this is just taken. It's got the possibility to take dissenting voices and move them down to page 2 of Google, basically, and it's going to apply to what we do. Spotify is specifically named in a memo that the Minister of Heritage, Stephen Guilbeault, made, specifically talking about how this is going to work. And so, and it names all the big Spotify, or pardon me, all the big podcast platforms, right? So this is going to be something that we're going to be subject to regardless. And it says that it's going to not target individual users, although Stephen Guilbeault slipped up in an interview and he said that users with a large audience, which is, how do you define large, right? Are going to be subject to it. So it's all poorly written and really vague, and it's just got a big opportunity for abuse by the people in power. And I think that's the worst kind of legislation. You don't want people in power that you can trust. You want legislation that is going to make them move in the right, proper, honorable, upstanding direction, regardless of what you think about them personally and whether they're capable of acting honorably, right? And then Bill C-36, it's got a few different parts to it. So one of them is that it's got this really wishy-washy version of hate. It's something more than, oh shoot, I can't remember what it was, but it talks about a few different things, and it's like more than disdain, and it's not quite like this, and it's not quite like that. It's just really subjective. And so it says that if you are found to be in violation and promoting hate speech, which is against any possible intersectional group, like at all. So old people, young people, East Indian people, bald people, whatever, right? It's purposely, it's like, maybe you can't make jokes about Hispanic midgets with club feet, right? Because that's just a whole lot of them all piled on together, right? And it's just more of this critical race stuff. And so it says that if you're found in contravention of that, you can be fined up to $50,000. And also you can pay up to $20,000. Well, they always say not less than. So not less than $20,000 in terms of basically reparations for the hurt and damage that you've done to that person who has to cope with hearing you. But also it's got a part in there that says that if a person thinks that you might be responsible for some hate speech down the road, you can be put under house arrest for up to a year. So ankle monitor, you can only come out of your house at certain times. There's certain areas that you can't be allowed to go to, and you have to submit to drug tests on a regular basis. I'm serious, dude. Like we can go through it line by line if you want. This is crazy weird. If a court deems that you're likely to commit hate speech, you can be put in a situation where you must submit to regular drug and alcohol tests. And like a third of this bill is the finer details on what they're going to do with your piss jugs and what they can and can't do. So they can't keep them. They got to get rid of them. So, I mean, that's great. We're not going to go all trailer park boys. It's the way of the road, right? But this is seriously like a big part of this bill is what they can and can't do with piss samples.
Where is this going to? Like, where is this leading us?
It's just the most ludicrous thing ever. I mean, like, this is them thinking that you might commit a crime. And then here's the kicker. This is a good one. I don't know if you know anybody who shoots a gun or not, but it's not mandatory under the way the bill is worded right now that the judge will take away your firearms license and any firearms, crossbows, bows, ammunition, yada, yada, yada. It's all in the bill. But if they don't decide to do that, they need to have a written reason why they thought it was okay to not take your guns away. And so, boom, there's this whole thing all opened up again in another bill. Like, it is just the most ridiculous thing you could ever imagine.
So is the Twos podcast going to disappear and fade into the oblivion then over the next, I don't even know how long?
No, it's going to keep pushing away, and it's going to get a $50,000 fine, and it's going to be charged $70,000 reparations, and it'll spend the rest of its life trying to climb out of that hole while doing some VPN in the Ukraine or something like that to still try and get the word out. And that's what it's going to come down to. Like, I honestly wonder if I had this theory, and I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but wouldn't it be interesting if Canada just unofficially decided to start doing all of their social media commentaries and stuff like that under a VPN of a country that just doesn't speak much English? Right? And so if you just set your VPN to Ukraine, I don't know if they speak a lot of English there, right? But you just set it to Ukraine, and then, oh, there's some English stuff. Okay, well, that's probably the Canadian stuff that we're looking for. And it just completely, here's this cage that the Liberals built around
Circumvents it.
thought and opinion we might have, and we're just all going to be over here hanging out and having a good time. I don't know. It's weird, dude, because it's a catch triple too, because if I do it as a foreigner under a different VPN, then it doesn't fall under the Canadian content and no one's ever going to see it. But if I do, then I'm subject to all these idiot laws and I've got to wear an ankle monitor because I think that the NDP can't handle money efficiently.
Honestly, that's coming from where I sit, right? Like, I'm not afraid to, I'm definitely not twos by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, I certainly have twos on, which makes me probably guilty by association.
Yeah,
I certainly,
this thing's only going to be up for another 6 months, and they're going to have to take it down.
Well, and I certainly, I got a lot of people texting and sending me some messages about Andrew Liebenberg, the doctor who I had on last week, talking. And just, did he say anything crazy? No, not really. He just actually was willing to talk. And that is right now a pretty crazy thing in this country because overall, nobody wants you to talk about anything right now. Everybody just kind of wants to, government's got it. Let's just take a step back, do your part, and everything's going to be A-okay. And I'm like, certainly doesn't feel that way. And everyone I talk to certainly doesn't think that way. But I don't know where this is going.
Well, I mean, it was a really good episode. If anybody's out there that hasn't listened to it, you should definitely check it out. It was a 2-parter. And, well, there's me tooting your own horn on your own show, right? But, I mean, it was just, it's so interesting because you've got all this stuff happening where it's all politicized, every side of it. And the doctor, I think he's a very well-spoken dude, and he probably knows a lot more about some things, I guess, than I definitely would. But like, I was listening to what he was saying, and his stance was more or less that big pharma isn't going to let us find cheap solutions because then they can't make a whole bunch of money. Now, from a corporate standpoint, that is a very dangerous thing to do, because could you imagine if some random vaccine company, if it ever came out anywhere, that even if somebody said that they said something, even if it wasn't documented, that they were going to purposely suppress an effective treatment for COVID-19 so that they can make billions of dollars. And then you're like, we shut the world down for a year and you guys purposely led us along just so you could make a little bit of extra money for your shareholders. Like, everybody's going to jail. That company doesn't exist anymore, right? It's far too big of a risk for any company to take. But I think really what it is just that everything has been so politicized about all this that if you just all of a sudden go and say, okay, well, you know what, we need to shut the economy down for a year or 2 weeks, no, 6 months, no, a year, no, a year and a half to get all this stuff rolled out. And then you guys can get back to your lives. And then you'll have people saying, okay, well, actually, we got something. We got something that we don't even need a big vaccine rollout for. And they're like, okay, well, what is it? And they say, well, it's ivermectin. Say, okay, well, how's that been around? How long's that been around for? Is it any good? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, we've been using it for literally decades, literally. And they're like, so we just shut down everything for a long time. Suicides way up. Everybody's lives in the gutter. And we had that thing sitting on the shelf behind us this whole time. It just, get out of my office, right? Like I worked at this company once, and I didn't do it, but someone had flipped. There was 2 switches right beside each other that got flipped around. One was for the horn and one was for something else. And my boss, for some reason, had thought that I did it. And so he's like, shit, you're going to have to edit that out. So my boss thought that I had flipped these 2 labels around, but no, that wasn't the case. I just happened to be nearby. To this day, I have no idea who did it. But I mean, it was just really innocent. One was the horn, one was something else. And so he says, hey, Twos, get over here. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, look at this. What the hell is this? I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, this one does this thing and that one does that thing. Don't tell me you don't know what it is. I want this rewired by the end of the day. And I'm like, hang on one second here. And so I just peeled the label off one side. I peeled the label off the other. And then I just flipped them. I'm like, does that work? And he's like, you could just tell, like, it wasn't that I'd solved the problem. It's just that it was such an easy solution. And he was already riled up about something. I don't even know what, that he felt like such an idiot for being embarrassed that there was such an obvious solution looking him right in the eye. And he made a big stink of it. And then I just kind of walked in and casually fixed it in literally a couple seconds. And I feel like maybe that's part of it with, like, the World Health Organization has lost so much credibility. And you look at every single part of this, it's all been about, we know what's best 100% of the time. No one's ever said, we're trying to figure this out. Hey, let's have an honest conversation about this. We don't quite know. It's been, we know exactly what's best for you, and you need to do it or everyone's going to die. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, actually, we need you to do this other thing. And they say, well, but you just said to do, no, we didn't. Nope. This is what you need to do. Like, how much did we flip-flop on masks? The social distancing, the hand sanitizing that has been variably enforced, and all this different stuff. Okay, well, this, Lloyd being on the border. Okay, well, in Saskatchewan, you can have a beer, and in Alberta, you can't. And the only thing separating it is this imaginary line. None of it's made any logical sense. And so now all of a sudden, if they're like, oh, well, yeah, we had this whole thing and we use it to treat river blindness. Oh, we're going to look like dicks. Just crush it. And I think that's a big part of it, because so much of this has just been about control.
But here's what I just don't get in that is, why can't politicians make mistakes? They certainly do. So why can't they just own up to it and be like, we made a mistake, or we didn't make a mistake, we were concerned, and then as the data comes out, we're gonna change, and we're gonna be like, no, this makes sense.
Well, because typically they just end up getting crucified for it. It's kind of one of the problems. Like, let's say Justin Trudeau comes out tomorrow and says, hey guys, I really kind of screwed up that whole SNC Lavalin thing.
Okay, Justin Trudeau's the one that will never get a pass, though.
Honestly, I would just say, you know what? If he came out and said, here's all the nitty gritty that Jody Wilson-Raybould was not allowed to speak to with the whole SNC Lavalin debacle, here it is, I'm coming clean. I'd be like, okay, well, you know what? That's fair. I'm going to let this one slide as a show of good faith because I really appreciate the honesty. I'm still going to hold your feet to the fire about everything else, but politicians need to be allowed to come clean on things every once in a while. And that's another problem with the media, and a problem with lots of people, I think, to be fair, right? I'm not going to lay this at the feet of big evil media corporations, but like, if you think about it, Doug Ford, I can't remember exactly what the details were of this, but maybe like about a year ago, he kind of just sort of was like, hey, I screwed up on something to do with some of the regulations or some of these draconian lockdowns that we're doing, and we're tweaking it and we're making it better. Right. And people were actually really excited to hear that. And they were really positive about it. Yeah. You had somebody like Andrea Horwath who thought she smelled blood in the water, but just ended up sounding like a bit of a buffoon. But overwhelmingly, what I saw in response to that was people saying, hey, you know what? This is great. Let's see more of it. And so, for things like that, you can do for things maybe like SNC Lavalin, it gets tricky because now you might be confessing to felonies if all of this stuff gets out, or, whatever it is, right? You've got this cover up going on where the Liberals are suing the Speaker of the House to try and keep the record sealed about the 2 Chinese virologists in Winnipeg who got fired and were extradited to, or they got kicked out of Canada and sent back to China. And do you know who the Speaker of the House is? He's a Liberal MP. Justin Trudeau is literally suing one of his own to keep this under wraps. This is just, it's unprecedented, right? I mean, it should be, that on its own should be enough to bury him right there. Like, I don't know why anybody's talking about anything else, right? And so presumably either they're really setting up a really elaborate cage to try and trap the Conservatives where they just think that they've won and they're going to get this. And then when they get it the last minute, it's a nothing burger. And they'll be like, look at how much time and money they wasted. Or it's really bad, potentially all the way up to, and I mean, this is just a whole lot of ifs, ands, and maybes, but hell, maybe Winnipeg and these virologists had some small role in the creation of the coronavirus, right? I mean, who knows? The point is that we don't know anything, and we can't know anything until we get more information here, and our government is keeping it from us. And how can we make informed electoral decisions if they're keeping it from us? And so why do we have a system set up where the people in charge have an incentive to not give us this information? They shouldn't be allowed to.
Man, that's a lot. That right there is a lot. I had heard about the 2 from Winnipeg, and now that you're talking about it, I totally remember reading the story now about them suing. I got to go back to what I said earlier in that why won't politicians, and then I basically just contradicted myself, because if you said of Trudeau, and I said never Trudeau, fuck yep. Trudeau. But in fairness, if Trudeau came out and just, I think what gets me frustrated the most about everything is it's just like, it feels like there's no trust to the common person that they can handle the information. Now, I'm not sitting here saying I need to have the government.
That's exactly it.
I'm not saying I need to know government secrets, right? Like, and maybe this Winnipeg thing is going to be a big, giant government, but like, I have no idea.
Well,
but overall, being treated like a kid over and over and over again, and understanding that we don't get, we just don't get the full story ever. And that the mainstream media is, in some parts, complicit in that, makes it like this is really frustrating.
Oh, it absolutely is. There needs to be way more granularity in what we can get, and there needs to be stuff taken away for the stuff that we're not allowed to see because we're just not smart enough. We can't handle it. Just trust us, and we'll take care of it. Oh, and also vote for us too, so that you can continue to have us take care of it. But yeah, like a little kid, it's just the grown-ups are handling it. You just keep paying your taxes and not being happy about any of it, whatever. We don't give a crap. You're still paying us and you can't do anything about it. And also, we're taking the summer off. Yeah, it's really frustrating when you look at the Danforth shooting, which was just like, has anything worse ever happened in Canada, right? And how Bill Blair explicitly shut down the public inquiry into it, right?
Back this up. Give me the background. Give the listeners the background, because
I hadn't planned on talking about this, so I'm not even up to date on it. But okay, so
layman's terms again. Yeah,
2019, something like that. I think this guy went around on a killing spree for about 36 hours, killed something like 22 people, all over like a couple small communities that were close to each other, and over this time, you had no warnings coming out, like, the Amber Alerts and the weather alerts and things like that on your phone. We've got that for that, but we don't have a mass shooter on a killing spree. Like, this guy just went straight up Terminator, except on just random people. And he had a fake cop car, and he had a fake police uniform, and he got a bunch of guns illegally from the States, and because he wasn't legally allowed to have firearms. And so, and this is just what we know. But the big question is why did the RCMP sit on this and not get everybody locked up in their homes? And like, this is something where actually, you know what, we do need to flatten the curve on that, right? We do need to have people staying at home if there's a guy running around shooting people, right? But they didn't tell anybody, and so this guy killed off 24 people. And
yeah, it says a gunman.
Families want to know. Yeah, go ahead.
A gunman disguised as a policeman killed at least 18 people, including a female Royal RCMP officer. And actually, I think it was more than that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was 22, but maybe I'm just obsessed with the number. But I mean, here's the thing: is that there was an absolute breakdown at the RCMP, and people wanted to have a public inquiry into it, and let's just put everything on daylight, because there's literally blood on somebody's hands here. Let's get some answers, because we need to know what happened, because we need to hold these people accountable. And more importantly, we need to make sure that this never happens again.
Here, I'll clarify. It said on April 18th, 19th, 2020, Gabriel Wortman committed multiple shootings and set fires at 16 locations in the Canadian province of Nova Scotia, killing 22 people and injuring 3 others before he was shot and killed.
Yeah.
That's geez, I can't believe that's, well, it's over a year ago now.
Yep.
It doesn't seem that long ago. I didn't realize they didn't have. I'm trying to bring my brain back to that time is the problem. That's the COVID year has warped reality, warped time. Like it feels like it's been a decade.
I don't know. Maybe it happened in 1986, or maybe
absolutely
last Thursday, right?
Right. As a grown adult, where you get to decide on a whole bunch of things, lots of times now I see the issues with government, and I just don't understand it. Right? I know, like I have you on here, and me and you talk round and round about different things in politics, because like it's just odd, right? Mm-hmm. But here we sit, and I thought going back to the doctor, Andrew, he had some, like, one of the cool things, if I go to back when I lived in Finland, I was saying this to a guy last night, is that like you saw McDonald's and fast food places in Helsinki. As soon as you left Helsinki, maybe it's changed now. I mean, it's been a decade since I was there. But when I was there in 2011, you didn't see McDonald's in the northern towns. Like, you didn't see any fast food. You want a fast food after the bar at night? There was a guy making fresh pizza for you. Like,
nice,
right? Here we have, like, you want to do some health, do some good for the population, start promoting things that actually do good for the population.
Yep. Yeah. We spent how much money and just human years on shutting down a virus that could have only ever hoped to have killed a very, very small percentage of us. Why don't we worry more about, why don't we have, if COVID was important enough to do this, we should have government mandated exercise.
That'd be interesting.
You are legally required to play on a sports ball team. Pick one. Yeah. But I mean, it's just all this hyped up and hyperbole.
Can you imagine if you got a fine? Listen, there's going to be a $50,000 fine if you don't join a rec team.
Okay, well, maybe I'm finding some good reasons for big government here. Because honestly, I think that would be great, because it sharpens people. Like,
well, it gets you moving.
Yeah.
Gets you interacting with people, which I always forget, because the podcast allows me to interact with people every week. Mm-hmm. But seeing people at the ball diamonds, watching kids' ball games, and like seeing what that does to people is just like, we need that back.
Yeah,
we need people to be interacting again.
But I mean, like, you look at how differently in a corporate world, people who have a long history of playing on sports teams work with people compared to
People who
folks that have
don't.
never done it,
Yeah.
right? And sure, there's lots of great people that have never swung a bat before, but like it adds a lot of depth to people's character, man. I couldn't advocate for it enough. And yeah, I guess this is me saying I know what's better for you than other people, but I'm right.
Well, I mean, just at the end of the day, over the last year, McDonald's didn't shut down. Sure, McDonald's didn't allow in, dining or whatever, right? But I mean, you could still get a Big Mac all through right? I'm not got nothing against Big Macs. I love myself a Big Mac. I'm just saying, every activity that we had got shut down. And the only way you can unless you were 18 and younger and wore a mask and were 6 meters apart or whatever the hell the damn thing was on the ice, which with 8 people, it was just on and on and on of stupidity. But like, what are you supposed to do if you're over 18? We're getting into the population that is the most, like, they're the population that actually can get this and die from it. And we're like, just sit at home, watch Netflix, don't complain, you're going to be great. It's like, well,
and if you want to play hockey, you're going to get tased.
Exactly.
Right.
Like,
it's just,
they should have found, I hope, you think this is coming back in the fall? We talked about the Delta variant and then you're joking around about Omega and everything else. You think it's coming back?
I think there's so many people that are just so far past giving a shit about it that it doesn't matter what it's going to do to you. It could literally, you could get it and it could swap your gender. And yeah, I guess maybe there's some people that will want to take it on purpose. But you'd be like, you know what? I'm going to take my chances and maybe I'll look good in heels. Right. But I mean, here's the thing, like it's been going on for so long where no one's having a reasonable conversation about this. Okay. So you're talking about the doctor and stuff and he brought up something. And so here's a little tidbit of my 222 cents that ended up on the cutting room floor because I couldn't find a great place to put it in. But do you want to hear it?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So there have been all kinds of different incentives to convince people to get vaccinated lately. The craziest one is in California, where they have a game show wheel spin for people who are vaccinated. Meanwhile, in Canada, we've set up a government support network for people who have had adverse effects from vaccination. And not to be outdone, Alberta and Manitoba are rolling out lotteries. Look, here's the thing. If you've been telling people this is perfectly safe and deplatforming people with concerns about it, you don't need to set up government support for people with adverse reactions at all, ever, because they're safe, right? How about instead of trying to incentivize people with prizes for doing it, why not just have an honest conversation with them about how it will or won't work for you and what the risks are? I don't want to get it because every single person pushing any opinion at all about this has a slant to it, and I can't trust any of them. Take away the smoke and mirrors, and you'll do a lot more to convince people like me that it might be a good thing. Look us in the eye. Talk to us. Stop treating us like we're not even worth a frank discussion.
That's a hell of a take.
I don't know. Maybe I should just throw it in there anyway. I couldn't find a good segue to lead into it or anything like that, but I don't know. Maybe it stands on its own.
Well, it epitomizes where I'm at, right? Like,
yeah.
It just, there's so many people, like, why the hell do I need a lottery? Like, why would winning $1 million, like, I just feel like that's such short-term thinking to get for and you're like, what? And then there's like, well, there was the ice cream thing out in Ontario.
Yeah.
Oh God, there was some great, like, I'll give them this. There was some clever slogans for getting
been so much marketing about it too, right? But I mean, here's the thing. Even with that $1 million lottery, that's all taxpayer money.
Yeah.
If you wanted to have $1 million lottery for this, I'm sure you could have gone out to the public and been like, we want to have $1 million lottery for the vaccine. Would anybody like to donate? You know, this year's been really tough on our government, and we want to do this to incentivize people. Is there anybody interested in putting their money where their mouth is in terms of how good these vaccines are, right? And it might be 10 or 20 bucks here. You might get the odd well-to-do person who thinks that they're going to put in 10 or maybe $100,000. But you'd get up to that presumably eventually. I mean, if everybody's as fervent about this as they keep saying they are, and all the people who were really for it haven't missed a paycheck in a year and a half, so you'd think they got a bit of cash to burn, right? But again, like it's super short-sighted. You're totally right, because even within that rollout of a bad idea, they're still doing it in the worst way possible.
Man, it's strange. It's just strange too. It's just strange. Yeah. That's all it is. It's just I sit over on my little island here and go, I don't know, right? Crush a couple Pilsners, carry on with my day, and away we go. That's pretty much where I'm at.
I mean, what else do you do at this point, really? And I don't know. Maybe it's on us. What can we do to convince the government that we're worthy of seeing information that isn't redacted? You know, if our government wants, if our opposition wants to ask questions about the WE scandal, can we do something that doesn't end up with them getting literal pages of blacked out documents? Right? I mean,
I don't know. I that's a big question. I don't know. What can we do as a population?
Actually, you know what? That might be a really good question to ask them. If there's any media guys out there, ask that to Justin next time you're getting to ask a question. Just be like, why don't you think the general population of people that you represent
can handle it?
Yeah. Why do you think they can't handle it?
Yeah.
And he'll say, drink box water sort of thing. Right. But I mean, at least you're putting it out there. Right. And I think that'd be actually, you know what? That'd be a good thing to put out to the opposition, you know, or anybody else, like hell, even the Maverick guys. Hopefully some of them will be checking in on this. I've got an episode coming up here in the next little bit where I interviewed one of their candidates, Dave Robinson.
And how was it? How did you do it for your, so on the 222?
Yeah.
You're going to have it on there?
I totally broke format and had him on. I'm still kind of compiling it a little bit. It would just be a disaster to just have as one long continuous unbroken take, because I've never really done anything like that before, and that's totally on me. But it was his first time being interviewed in anything like this, my first time doing anything like that. And like, because I've had a lot of people asking about being on my show. I'm like, well, the format isn't really all that conducive, right? And so I was just kind of thinking about it. And then he asked if he could say a few things. And I'm like, well, you know what? I could just throw the format out the window for a day. Why not? Right. And so that's going to be coming up pretty quick here.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. It was a completely different experience. Like technically they're both podcasts, but they were in no way similar at all whatsoever. Right. And so, yeah, I imagine it's got to be really interesting to sit down with different people on a regular basis. And like, if it was the same guy, you'd probably know what kind of direction it was going to go. Like, I'm guessing if you have me on again, episode 222, for example, you'll probably know, okay, well, if I ask him something like this is probably what I can expect him to say. Right. But it was just really interesting because I'm like, okay, well, you know what? If I ask him this, he's probably going to say that. And then I can lead into this. And then I'm like, nope. Just rewriting the whole thing as I went. And so that was fun and interesting. But I mean, again, that's probably more an indication of me than anything else. So good learning experience. And so that'll be out pretty quick here.
Are you going to do more of it like that?
I think on occasion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had a really interesting sort of light bulb moment with somebody who works in the mining sector, and she was like, well, you know what, actually the mining for the stuff you need for car batteries, you know, electric car batteries, isn't nearly as toxic as everybody thinks it is. I'm like, well, boom, that's it right there. That's a conversation that no one's really had. And like, I'm not somebody who likes to just demonize things that I may not agree with wholeheartedly. I'd rather just have a frank conversation about the pros, cons, limitations, potential, things like that, right? And I think the people who listen to me or who follow me on a regular basis, they get that and that they would find that interesting. Because, I mean, if nothing else, even if you come away from it and you just be like, okay, well, you know what? I think electric cars still suck. But the next time the conversation comes up, you're more equipped to actually be able to add to it. And if someone's like, oh, well, you know what? They're the best, and everybody who doesn't listen to it is just a rig pig redneck, right? Well, actually, you know what? Here's why it's bad. Here's why it's good, right? And so I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I like to try and focus on, even if I just eviscerate people mercilessly on the podcast sometimes.
Well, I'll say it again. I hate to pump your tires too much, but man, when I'm in a bad mood, I flick you on, and you're one of the very few podcasts I listen to regularly that gets a chuckle. It gets me to chuckle. Like, just gets like, I'm like, yeah, that's clever. That was very clever.
Well, I mean, so much of it, I really just try and go in a different direction than most other podcasts, right? Like, I don't think there's anybody. I'm sure there are to some extent, but even then they're a lot more long form, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. Hell, I don't even know how long we've been talking for, and it's been great the whole time, right? But you might have to split this into a few episodes. But
in fairness to the doc, I wasn't going to split the doc into two, but we had in his position, he wanted to make sure that what we put out was not going to get him in serious trouble. So we split it into two. And normally I don't do that. But once again, you talk about having a guy on, you normally don't do that. It's like, what's your fucking show? Do what you want with it. And so to me, making it a two-parter just was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. Like, I'm not scared of any repercussions at this point. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll be right beside you with a bracelet and not able to, go pee without the government sitting there with a jug ready to see what I got in my system.
Yeah, well, I mean, screw it. If I become some random martyr that the government decides to go after some fledgling podcast that's just starting to pick up a little bit of traction to make an example of them, well, hey, you know what? That's probably going to set them up really poorly on the international level. And they're going to be like, well, maybe we need to walk this back a bit. Maybe we were kind of being dicks, right? So, I mean, like I told the CRTC to kiss my ass a few episodes ago. So I don't imagine they're fans of me.
I would say if they listen to just pick one of the episodes, I think you're in enough hot water with some of the takes you have that are awesome, but they're not going to like any of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't think I've said anything that's really bad or offensive or anything like that in any of the episodes, but it's very, very blunt.
Blunt is a good way to put it. Well, I've been keeping you here. We talked about how long we've been going for. We've been going for quite some time. So how about we slide into the Crude Master Final Five, and I'll let you get on with your day.
All right, sounds good.
We did the Final Five, obviously, in the first episode, and I got some of the questions I normally like to ask out of the way. But I figure I know who you're going to say on the first one. Regardless, if Twos was into a pay-per-view celebrity boxing match, all these, you had Mayweather and which one of the Pauls. Anyways, doesn't matter. Twos is going to be on a celebrity boxing match. You get to pick your opponent. You get to trash talk. You get the lead-up hype. Who are you taking?
Oh, well, obviously Rachel Notley.
Rachel Notley?
God, no. Wouldn't that just be though? Could you imagine? No, God, no.
Twos is a woman beater.
No, that'd definitely be Justin Trudeau. And I don't know. I mean, he's probably got some pretty good reach. I'm not a short guy, but I'm not tall. And I imagine he keeps in decent shape. But I mean, you've seen pictures of him. He skips leg day. Like it could.
Twos going to. Can you imagine the lead up for a 2-month period lead up to this celebrity boxing match, and you just twisting words around Trudeau and him talking about whatever? That'd be fantastic.
Oh yeah, we'd just be going head to head in interviews and stuff like that, and I'd just lean over and I'd be like, Justin, you motherfucker, I'm gonna make you black and blue face.
I see you put a little bit of thought into this.
No, this is just I don't know what any of these questions you're going to ask me are. I'm just flying off the top of my head here.
All right. Well, I asked in the first go around who you'd sit down with. I'm curious if you could go back and be a part of one conversation, like be in the room, be a fly on the wall. Where would you go?
One conversation. What's a Oh, you know what? It'd be something where I wanted to just daylight things, like it wouldn't be, oh, I wanted to be there when they signed the Declaration of Independence, or I wanted to be there when Nicolas Cage stole the Declaration of Independence. It would be something like Roswell, New Mexico, where I could just be a fly on the wall and be like, well, actually, no, those were weather balloons, or no, these were pygmy dwarfs from the Amazon. And that's all it was. Or yeah, we have aliens. Isn't it crazy? Donald Trump knows whether we have aliens or not. You'd think he'd spill the beans on it at some point. But anyways, yeah, I'd want to do something like that and just daylight some fun conspiracy theory, something like that.
Well, I did not have this written down, but I'm going to ask, what's your favorite conspiracy theory then?
There aren't any left, dude. Oh, vaccine passports. You're ridiculous. That's just a crazy conspiracy theory. Oh, the liberals are going to pass laws limiting who can control things and who can say what. No, that's just, you're crazy. You're crazy. And hey, the scores, like, just the conspiracy theorists are just running up the scoreboard at this point. I mean, the only thing left is Zuckerberg a lizard person pretty much at this point. And then whatever the hell that stuff is they put in the water that helps your teeth grow that people think makes them crazy or whatever, or not your teeth grow, but keeps them white, fluoride. Yeah. I mean, those are pretty much the only ones left, and they're pretty far out there, right? So
G5. The network.
Oh, yeah.
That's a new one.
Well, I mean, that didn't really have a lot of credibility to it to begin with, I don't think. I mean, Huawei doing the G5, now there's an honest conversation you can have, but as far as some network implanting stuff into your brain and somehow having the vaccine react with it, and yeah, it doesn't really hold water. Yeah, it's just there's some really fun ones out there that have been just too fun to not talk about, but all of the ones that everybody will say you're crazy for, the ones that people will actually acknowledge and go to your way to say that you're insane, a year later they're like, oh no, we never said that. Hey, we're going to be talking about the Great Reset in 2 years, man. But anyway, next question.
Do you read like books?
Oh yeah.
Okay. What's your most influential book? Like, what's one book that you couldn't put down and has maybe influenced how your brain thinks?
Oh, shoot. Okay. Maybe I'll just run off. Actually, you know what? I'll just make it real easy then. Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That man is absolutely wonderful. I don't think I've ever read more books than that, but I'm a big fan of Joseph Heller, Catch-22, Fight Club. Chuck Palahniuk's other stuff isn't nearly as good, although it's still not bad by any means. The best novels I've ever read are the A Song of Ice and Fire, so George R.R. Martin. As far as nonfiction goes, though, rounding back to Thomas Sowell, a guy named Bill Bryson as well. He's got so many interesting things to say about just boring stuff, and I find it all fascinating.
That's a good list.
Yeah,
Here's your final one then, because you bring up Roswell and you bring up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and everything else. Do aliens exist?
So, oh shoot, is it the Planck equation? I can't remember exactly what it is, but basic idea is that you've got a constant that is, what's the probability that there's going to be a sun that's going to be conducive to life?
Right.
And then you'll have a constant that's going to be, what's the probability that there's going to be a planet in that solar system that is the right size and then has a magnetic field? Because I as far as I know, we're not exactly sure why, but a magnetic field is really important to fostering life. And then are they going to have water? And is it going to be at the right distance away from the sun, where it's not so close that it's burning hot and it's not so far away
That it's freezing
just an
cold.
ice rock?
Yeah.
And so there's like a dozen of these constants, and each one of them is just, the probabilities are minuscule. Like you round them to the 20th digit and there's still zero sort of thing, but they're not technically zero, right? And then at the end of it, you multiply it by how many, and it starts off with a basis of how many galaxies there are, right? And then you multiply it by how many galaxies there are in the universe. And if we're in an infinite universe, that thing that you multiply it by is infinity. And so the idea is that no matter how small these numbers are, because you're multiplying them all together and each one has, say, 10 zeros on it, well, now you're getting into a point where you've got like a million zeros before the decimal point, but you multiply it by infinity. And any finite number multiplied by infinity is infinity. So presumably there's infinite life in the universe. And I think that's the best explanation I've heard as to whether or not there is.
That's a hell of an explanation. There was a documentary on Netflix, and I can never remember what the heck it was called. But I certainly was not alive when they put the satellites. Do you know what I'm talking about? Back in the 70s, they
like the Voyager.
They slingshotted out of our solar system, out of our universe, and they asked a lady if she thought there was aliens, and she took a straw and was explaining, if you look through the straw, that's a universe, and then you just you try and do that across the sky, and she goes, the universe, the galaxy is just so, like you say, infinitely big that you can't even comprehend it. It's like it's impossible that there isn't life out there.
Yeah, so basically that exact same thing. I've never heard of that straw thing. It's a pretty good example. They used to talk about it in ancient Rome or Greece. I mean, everybody gets them all mixed up all the time, so I will too. Where they just kind of said that if a centurion, maybe it was Rome then, went like as far as he could and then threw a spear and then went and picked up that spear and then threw it as far as he could, and he just did that forever. That's just how long infinity is, right? It was a couple thousand years ago. They were figuring stuff out. It's not sexy, right? But like the whole point is that it's just a big place. And what we can even see, the observable universe, right, is just what is far enough away that, like, if we're 12, 13 billion years or something like that into the universe, we can only see the furthest thing away we can see existed 12 or 13 billion years ago, right? And the observable universe is expanding at the speed of light around us in all directions. And so who knows how, like, just with what we can see, it's just vast and endless. And who even knows what else is out there?
You think we've had aliens to Earth then?
It's possible. I mean, it's interesting, the whole idea of any sufficiently advanced technology being indecipherable from magic, right? I mean, we don't have anything where we could really even hypothesize how we could get to another solar system. Really, I mean, you've got some bar napkins with a couple weird sketches of wormholes and stuff on them, but it's just a concept. There's no practical application of it. You can't cryogenically freeze people for a few thousand years unless they're Walt Disney or Joe Biden. And so, like, just the even thought of being able to get there, it's possible, I guess. But again, we're limited by it being somebody that's close enough that they could have gotten here already in the 2 billion years that the Earth's been around. And so there's, again, it's kind of that same equation, but with a finite number at the end of it instead of infinity. So it's possible, but probably unlikely.
Well, I'm glad we've done the full gambit today, Tews. We've
covered everything.
everything. I appreciate you coming on and doing what I do. Just my curiosity and everything else. You're a heck of a guest to have on. I certainly enjoy our chats. So I appreciate you coming on and look forward to episode 222 because I will make sure that you certainly have that one.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. This has been a lot of fun and I appreciate it. I had a huge uptick in people checking me out after our last episode. So that was really cool too. You've got a lot of fans out there and I guess they didn't think I was a bumbling fool. So that's nice. Always a win.
It was funny. I after we did that episode, I bumped in Justin Agarwal just comes to mind for some reason. But he was sitting there and he's like, "Yeah, I've been listening to the podcast." I was like, "Oh, cool." And he's like, "Yeah, I didn't know who this 222 guy was." But then I listened to him and I'm like, "Well, he sounds like Sean really thinks whatever about his podcast. So I better check that out." And he goes, "Well, now I listen to his podcast every time it comes out." And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. That's cool. That's, that's what you hope happens." I'm hoping I'm not bringing on people that are like, "Oh, this guy sucks." That certainly can happen.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably, you've done almost 200 of these so far, so it's probably happened once or twice, but I think that if I was on your show and then all of a sudden, hell, my audience practically doubled that week, right? And so,
that's pretty cool.
Presumably there was a bunch of people that thought that I had some interesting stuff to say. So that was huge.
I don't have to toot your horn anymore because people who've listened to that episode just go back and listen to it. But what you do is clever, to the point, quick, easy. I understand with what I do, you need a chunk of time, right? You need to be on people have different ways they listen to podcasts, and I find it so intriguing, right? You got the farmer who hops in the tractor and he's farming and seeding away or whatever, spraying, it don't matter, and he'll flick it on. You got I got a lady who listens to it while she works out. I've been trying to figure that one out. That one, I'm like, geez, I would want some music or something, right?
Yeah.
Not this.
Yeah.
Guess there's a lady out there loves working out and listen to it. There's people that walk and listen. Obviously, there's oil field guys, salesmen, everything that drive and listen to it. Yep. But I'm always curious what the new one's going to be of actually, I do X, and I'm always looking for what X is. So if you're listening to this and got a unique way you listen to the podcast, I'd be really curious because I think it's always cool to hear how people and where they listen, right? I got a buddy in Wisconsin who makes beer and listens to the podcast. So shout out to Joe.
Nice. Well, they make a lot more beer than you realize in Wisconsin. Milwaukee's always typically associated with it, but actually there's some companies here in Canada that maybe have small operations here and they import the majority of their beer from Wisconsin.
Really?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Minhas. Actually, to be fair, I haven't looked into that in the last few years, but they brew a little bit in Alberta to be Alberta based, and this was back when the credits were slightly different and they had that small brewers credit, and then they made the lion's share of their beer in Wisconsin and shipped it up here because that was cheaper than brewing it in Alberta. Yeah, I love overregulation. Have I ever told you that?
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cheaper to outsource it to Wisconsin and ship it on trucks all the way up here than it was to just have some people here with fermenters.
Figure that one out.
It's all bureaucracy, dude. It's needless government rules that stifle innovation and entrepreneurship and progress on any meaningful level.
Like drinking beer.
Yeah. I want to drink beer, but I don't want to spend a ton of money doing it. So can you please get rid of this red tape so that I can have a cheaper buzz? Is that too much to ask?
It's too much to ask, Tews.
It's too much to ask.
That's right. Well, thanks again for hopping on.
Anytime, buddy. Anytime.
Hey, folks. Thanks for joining us today. If you just stumbled on the show, please click subscribe. Then scroll to the bottom and rate and leave a review. I promise it helps. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday, we will have a new guest sitting down to share their story. The Sean Newman Podcast is available for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcast fix. Until next time. Hey, Keeners, thanks for tuning in. Hope everybody's having a great start to the week. Get out there, enjoy it. Summer is here. A ton of the restrictions have been lifted, so enjoy it. Go intermingle with some family, some friends. Enjoy some beverages. Enjoy the sun. Put a smile on. Good days are ahead of us, and hopefully, God willing, we get about 3 more months of summer where the sun just shines, and it'll be into September. That's what this guy's hoping for. Now, if you're the champ, hurry up. I want to get out there and whack some balls into the water. All right? We'll talk to you guys Wednesday.